welcome, Murat. Thank you for joining our show. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Murat. Hello, Armin. Nice to meet you guys, at least online.
Hello.
Exactly. But better than nothing. And at least finally I meet you, even if not in person, but at least we can talk to each other. I'm very pleased to do that.
Yes, I was able to meet Peter personally in an international event in Korea. We and me have been in touch somehow on the internet, but could not meet until now. So glad for me too.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, yeah.
How is everybody? Everything is fine so far?
It is. We had some lockdown for 17 days because of the peak of pandemic here. It got a little bit better, but we are going to see how it will go further, because the reopening is also important. So I hope that it will be planned well.
Yeah.
Do you also have a big vaccination campaign in Turkey?
We have, but it started very well in terms of the speed of vaccination. Turkey was the third in the world, but unfortunately we are not in the first 30 at the moment because of the problems in getting the vaccines. Because unfortunately, at the very beginning, a Chinese vaccine have been chosen by the government. And unfortunately, the Chinese did not provide the promised amount of vaccines. So that's the problem. In the beginning, it was very good. I mean, the vaccination used to go very fast. And of course, there's a big population, approximately 80 million. So even if the 13 million of people have been vaccinated with 2 doses, as far as I can remember, there are still a lot to reach the immunity, I mean, the herd immunity. Unfortunately, so we slowed down afterwards. Started good, but could not. There's actually here in Turkey, we say starting like a Turk and finishing like a German. Have you ever heard about that?
I know.
Or maybe vice versa. Starting and finishing like a Turk, because Turks have real practical intelligence, but no planning talent. So unfortunately, the planning was not good. Really well, but because the plan was not very well, for example, just choosing just one vaccine, which could not be provided. The BioNTech entered as well, but it is quite new, and the amount is not as much as expected, as far as I know.
And it's a Turkish guy who invented this BioNTech, no? It's a Turkish guy.
Yes, it's a couple. They are the Gastarbeiter in Germany. So quite successful professor in, I don't know, in one of the sciences, not a doctor, I think, maybe a pharmacologist, I don't know, something like that. But the invention is really good. They have been awarded by the German government as well.
Yeah. And they are billionaires now, of course.
The problem is the production rate of vaccine is low.
It's very slow.
If it comes to a pandemic, it's not an epidemic, so it has to be produced in very large amounts, very large numbers. So it is unfortunately impossible. Only I think the US could do it well in terms of the production rate and the vaccination rate, and England as well, but no other country could be as successful.
In the US, President Trump started the production last year in March or so. So they were a time ahead.
Well, there are contradictory information, Peter. For example, Trump was one of the non-believers, so we really don't know whether he started.
True, but he used a kind of military, emergency order to these vaccination companies very early. So they had the first vaccinations.
I have no idea. I have no idea, but this will be written in history. In fact, there may be things that we don't know yet. There are conspiracy theories as well, but the only truth or the undisputable truth is there is a virus. whether it has been released on purpose, whether it was a biological war tool or whatever, but there is a pandemic. So we have to fight it instead of digging what it is underneath of it, at least for now.
Yeah, we agree. We agree that there's some virus around.
Yeah, always viruses around. I would not wonder if we would have soon Ebola again, but we see.
We will see.
We have a little bit bad connection here. Yeah, there's a little lag in audio and video.
You're freezing.
Yeah.
You see, sometimes there's a little interruption in voice or the transfer of the image. Anyway, let's talk about archery. Pandemic is the common problem in the world at the moment, but and it also diminished our daily habits, even archery habits, at least here, because Istanbul was a city where we could find limited practice opportunities, and we had a indoor range where we used to train, where we used to practice, and we had to take a long break, protect people, to save people. So a small group of my group can occasionally practice by just going to that range in a small as a small group, or sometimes outdoors. And now with the spring, I hope that we will have more opportunities to practice outdoors. So in many other cities in Turkey and overall, there are open air facilities more, but not in Istanbul. The place is quite expensive here, and even the forests are registered for sort of institutions who provide some barbecue facilities or something. You cannot go to forest actually.
Yeah, let's hope for the best, that you soon can do archery again.
Murat, so the only thing you could do was hunting wild boar in the woods. No?
Well, yeah. Well, as we spoke when we were being transferred to the airport in Korea, you remember? The wild boar is almost the only big game that we can hunt, because the others are restricted. Most of them are endangered species. And what I believe is that bow hunting is a part of the archery culture and history. So I can, of course, some anti-hunters can dispute, and I respect what you think, but this is actually, bow and arrow is a weapon of war and a weapon of hunt, and the real results, in terms of the evaluating the performance of the weapon as well as your skill, is actually testing it on the field. And of course, it's not possible to test it on the battlefield. So the only real test, the real life test, is hunting. So as long as it is legal. I think in Austria it's not, but in Hungary, for example, I know that many Austrian bow hunters go to Hungary to bow hunt, right?
Also to France or to Spain, Italy.
Spain. Yeah, I have a good friend in Spain. We were about to plan a bow hunting there. Süleyman Matos. Hello to him. Probably he will watch this. But we could not do that because of the pandemic. But hopefully everything will return to the normal, and we will do that one day in Spain as well.
And what do you are going to hunt in Spain? Which animal? Which game?
Well, we talked about going after wild boar again. But of course, I'm open to anything, because I'm not a hardcore hunter. In fact, I'm not a hardcore hunter. What I'm trying to see is the real effect of the bow and arrow on field. So it is for enthusiasts like us, it is not enough to read and get theoretical data, because the practical data, the experience is hands-on experience, is very important if you are doing that seriously.
I really understand you, Murat, because, back then, before I started archery, I wasn't a lot in hunting, but when I started archery, I also started hunting with a rifle and the bow. because I had to experience this. I had to see how it works, how it
Exactly.
is. And that's very, and I also now don't hunt a lot because I have done it and I know what's going on. And that's the experience you should have to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So this is quite important. I mean, the bow and arrow have been in the life of human being for more than 50,000 years, even maybe more. Mm-hmm. And it means that it is like a tree with a lot of branches and little branches and leaves at the tip of these branches. So there's a very large labyrinth, and all these branches and the leaves are subject to work on. So hunting is just one of them. Mm-hmm. But hands-on experience on each of these little leaves is important. Yeah. So especially in Turkish archery, it is not. Oh, can you hear the thunder? I don't know whether you got the. Yeah, it was rainy today, and now there's thunder. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so it is. For example, if it comes to Turkish archery, it is not only a weapon of war, not only a weapon of hunting, but there are a lot of symbolic meaning of the bow and arrow, both politically and religious, both pre-Islamic and post-Islamic. So all these should be investigated and discovered as much as we can do. Because in some aspects, it is almost impossible to do hands-on experience or to have hands-on experience. For example, the mystic aspects of the bow and arrow, or the relation with the old religion of Turks. I mean, the pagan time, the animist religion of Turks.
And it's not only Turkish; it's all around. What I wanted to say is, you tell it about Turkish history and pre-Islamic history and so on, but it's around the world. In every culture, they had the bow in this or that form, you know. So it's highly connected to the history of mankind, and I appreciate you said this, the mystic aspect, the symbolic aspect. It's, if you like to understand archery in its whole form, you have to go into all these areas and explore it and learn something about it.
And what I believe is it is not enough to explore only a particular tradition if you really want to go deep. For example, if you want to learn the mystic aspects of Turkish archery, you have to look at the mystic aspects of, say, Bhutanese archery, for example, to find connections. Because the mystic aspects, especially because they were esoteric, always been hidden somehow. Yeah. So therefore, in order to explore them, you have to look at the other traditions, and not only for the technical aspects. It makes sense to look at the other traditions as well, like I did, for example, at the very beginning. When I started the revival movement, I went to Korea, for example, to see the real tampering shooters, how the know-how, the practical know-how got lost in the early 20th century.
I found out the deeper you go into mystics and old legends and religions, the more you find out how tight connected these all are, how similar, how uniform. In many, in the most cultures, they have the same legends, the same believings. Back then, in the before Christianity and before Islam and so on, these old religions and these old mysteries and mystics and legends are very similar all around the world. It's very interesting.
Interestingly, Peter, even after the monotheist religions, although the dress, the outfit changed, the core stayed the same. So if you really want to understand the mystic aspects of the of archery in a monotheist era, you have to understand the pagan time, because in most of the time the post-monotheist era is just well-dressed, but had the same essence or had the same core of the pagan times in archery. So the old belief, previous beliefs, being decorated to make them look differently. For example, not last year, the year before, I went to Hungary. I was invited for a conference about the daily life of Hungary during the Ottoman occupation. And there I gave a lecture about the mystic aspects of flight archery, which I really found interesting. And I think the participants found it interesting as well, because you will see that these aspects are much more related to the pre-monotheist era rather than the monotheist era. So it's interesting. People don't change that radically. I mean, even in their belief systems.
And the monotheists, prophets or religion founders, they couldn't, as you say, they couldn't change everything. So they put many of the pagan ideas into the monotheistic religions and kept on having, oh, this is, you know, Saint Mary. And I'm sure in the Islam, you also have some stuff.
I really don't want to go out too much of archery, but for example, you can see syncretism, as it's called, like for example, in the Osiris cult, Isis and Horus are not too much different than Mother Mary and Jesus, for example. So you really don't know what is history and what is the authentic archaic belief. So if it comes to archery, it is almost the same.
Very interesting. If talking about religion, I learned a lot in the last few months about the Mithras cult, you know, Mithras. Yeah, Mithras with an M.
Mithra cult, yes.
You know, and you know, in every religion, in the Islam, in the Christ Church and so on, there are fragments and parts of this Mithras cult, which very popular during the Roman Empire. You know, that's what they were competing religions, the early Christs and the Mithras. So it was by luck that the Christ, so to say, won this religion battle. It's very interesting, very interesting.
Exactly. And it is mainly because all the old world, I mean, the Anatolia and the Mesopotamia, that was the cradle of the first civilizations, like Sumerians, Hittites, and the others, even go a little bit south, the ancient Egyptian culture, all together created the civilization of mankind, really. And the following civilizations adopted many motifs of the previous ones. So that's why, and even the Christianity, they remember the missions of Saint Peter and Petrus, who started from Antioch, from Antakya in modern Turkey. So, and this kind of tracking should be done in archery research as well. I mean, not the technical of the archery, but the history and the cultural and religious past. The details that got lost can be found.
And to make now one bridge, and then you can't say this stuff don't belongs to this. You understand? Because then you see the whole thing is one thing and not just target archery, just bow hunting, just flight archery, just that. Or
especially if it comes to the classification of bows. For example, Armin told me before that there are some blurry parts in the classification of Turkish style bows, like Crimean Tatar bow, the Ottoman bow, the Persian bow, etc. And of course, in order to understand or recategorize the bows, even just a precise, accurate classification requires understanding the history well. So Crimean Tatars have been the alliances of the Ottoman Empire after the 16th century. And they were Turkic, I mean, ethnically and culturally Turkic, and so much that they were considered to be equal to the Grand Vizier. I mean, the Khagan of the Crimean Tatars were considered to be equal to the Grand Vizier, the second top person in the empire. So the categorization is not that accurate. So Crimean Tatar balls should be considered maybe as one of the Ottoman balls. So, and if it comes to the late Persian ball, it's the same, because the Iranian plateau have been ruled by the Turkish dynasties after 9th century. So expected the Sassanids, all the Safavids, Qajars, and all the other dynasties were Turkish. So it's the same with the Mamluks. Together with the Caucasian cultures, of course, there's a Caucasian culture which is quite important because they founded the state, the Mamluk state. But the Turkish rulers then played an important role. So the military aspect of Mamluks also give great details about Turkish archery, and of course makes this categorization of these balls and the archery traditions discussable as well. Or questionable.
I would say also Hungarian archery is highly connected to Turkish archery.
Yes, it is very much within my interests, because I have had very good Hungarian friends, very close friends, and Hungary is really interesting. I don't know how they look from your perspective. I mean, from North European people's perspective, but they are really an Außenseiter in the middle of the Europe, just because they have a completely different. And even the adoption of Christianity by Hungarians ran quite differently, because they approached to Constantinople first, I mean, to the Orthodox Church, but then politically they decided to belong to the other front, I mean, to the Catholic Church, and then they came closer to Pope. But at the very beginning, they were in the middle and trying to find a good political stance for themselves, good political base. And
I think also because they are in the center of many borders, you know, to the east and to the west. So they always had a kind of struggle between the cultures a little, I think, the Hungarians, the Magyar people.
Modern Hungary, that had heritage of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, had the heritage of the Ottoman Empire. But if you look at the 10th century Hungary, the big Hungarian kingdom, they came there under the rule of Arpad as a confederation. Probably it was a confederation, consisted of 7 tribes, because having confederations or building allies was a tradition in Central and Inner Asia. And nobody can claim that there were no Ural-Altaic language speaking clans within this Arpad's community. So they were quite heterogeneous, so not very uniform. And right after they settled the Carpathian Basin, they adopted Christianity because it was a very clever political move. And it is interesting because it was the year 1000 that their king Ishtvan, later canonized by Pope, so Saint Ishtvan, adopted Christianity for his nation. And just 40 years after that, Tuğrul Bey, the Turkish ruler, the founder of the Selçuk Empire, they were already Muslim, but they approached the Caliph and became a member or part of the Islamic front, let's say. So they were both from the Inner Asia. They spoke a very similar language. I'm interested in Hungarian language as well. So the languages are quite similar. They have not been classified as the same language or in the same language family. But Armin, this is quite interesting. As you asked me whether the Crimean Tatar balls should be considered as Turkish balls as well, whether the Hungarian language and Turkish language belong to the same linguistic family have been discussed until 1996, so recently. So they could not decide. And the decision was taken most probably politically, so not based on scientific data, because the grammar is unbelievably close to each other.
I want to say one more thing about religions. It's an old political trick to use religion to connect smaller tribes who had different religions. It was the same with Christianity, with Constantine. He knew he only could connect this big empire if he says, okay, now Christianity is the religion. And they drove out all little other cults and you know what. And the same was with Islam. There were many tribes and many countries. And so they said, so we are Islamic people, and so they are connected under one roof.
From the very beginning, for Christianity, I can say the 300 AD, but for Islam, from the very beginning, they have been political fronts. So whether they are good for spiritual refinement or spiritual development, it's another question that can be answered by others. But there's a political face which cannot be disputed, right?
And I know Armin is angry because we don't talk about the archery.
No, it's fine. Whatever this is, we always drift away. It's fine.
I have a question because we talk about religion, and I have Murat. I saw some documentaries or some podcasts also, and they said the very earliest mosques from Islam were not pointed to Mecca, but to Petra in Jordan.
It's true.
And they say maybe the core, the roots of the religion are not as they tell us today, but it's from this Petra culture over there. Well, it's very interesting.
It is interesting, and of course, many things were adopted afterwards by any religions. Take the Christianity, for example, the main symbol.
No comparison, no problem. It's very interesting. I know it from Christianity too.
What I'm trying to say is cross, for example, is a very late symbol. In the early Christianity, there wasn't any symbol like that. So this symbol has been adopted afterwards and became the main symbol. So it is exactly the same in the mosques. The earlier mosques, as you said, were built towards Mecca. And there were no minarets either, for example, in the early mosques. As far as I can remember, it was the 8th century AD when the first minaret was built on a mosque. So many things have been,
They go so far to say in these days, Mecca was a very small village or even not existing in this documentary and so on. And that's why they pointed to Petra, because this was a crossing of the trading routes, you know, of the business routes from back then, because there was the Silk Road incoming, and from Africa the goods were I don't know.
The problem of history in terms of the method, I mean, the method of historiography is that people try to understand the past by using the criteria of today. We cannot know that. I'll tell you a very interesting thing, and then we can go to archery because Armin will be more impatient, I'm sure about that. But I will tell you that, you know, that Istanbul is a very cosmopolitan city, and here 3 monotheist religions survived for centuries. And when I participated in a cultural tour in Istanbul, we visited an old neighborhood of the city, and with many mosques and synagogues and churches. And we went into an Armenian church. And there were some relics reportedly relics. But these relics were kept in an ancient Greek sarcophagus. And there was a stela just with a Greek stela with all the symbolic meanings and everything on that. But there were some big rounded circles around the head of these figures on the stela. It was a typical Greek stela, but they didn't hesitate to
mix it up.
The material. They mix up, so you will never know actually what kind of symbols they used and why they converted to another symbol. You would not know that. But of course, there are some iconoclasty sometimes. For example, that the Saturn is depicted with horns and goat legs, because it was a Pan, which also names Pan, represented the excessive emotions,
a satire,
sexual emotions,
and wine drinking and so on.
Didn't want it. Yes, wine drinking, being drunk, etc. So that's why Christianity didn't want it. And iconoclastically, this figure has been converted and used as a depiction of the main enemy of Christianity. So these kind of things can be tracked back. Many cannot. So unfortunately, in many aspects, I think we can do is speculating. And if it comes to archery, we should be as far as possible from speculating and as close as possible to being evidence-based. I mean, finding solid evidence, written sources. And even the written sources are not reliable, as I told before in many interviews. So they have to be tested on fields.
I'm also asking the folks, yes, it's written in the old texts. So I say, okay, everyone could write everything into a book, and this was back then, it was propaganda like it is today. You know, they wrote what they liked.
Yes. In fact, I agree, but of course, I disagree in some points, because in the old times, books were written by scholars, really. So not everybody could write and read.
And they were paid by their Caesars and their sultans and their caliphs and so on.
They ordered. They ordered. Exactly. But speaking specifically about archery treatises, the unreliability of texts or the need to confirm the technical information given in the treatises, it does not depend on that features that you said, that if they've been written by order or something, but there are some other reasons that they are not as accurate as the modern textbooks.
And you know, also back then, today, for an example, I remember, I think it is 2 years in the past, Vladimir Putin presented on video a new type of missile, of rocket. And he stands beside a big tube and says, this rocket is inside there. And then they had the CGI, how this rocket works. So it is propaganda. You don't know if a rocket is in this tube. You even don't know. And so also the old emperors and old warlords, they said, oh, we have the miracle weapons. We can shoot 2 kilometers and no problem for us. So they did the same thing back then, no?
You're very right. And that's why I have been advocating the experimental studies in archery, even in archery. So if it comes to prove the claimed features of the bow and arrow, you have to do some field testing. And it is...
I have a very funny idea. Maybe we today are now able to do things they just wrote down back then, you know, because we try it and we can do it, and they just wrote it for propaganda. We don't know. You know what
Nobody
I mean?
knows that.
possible.
But here, I mean, to eliminate the information that can be based on propaganda, you can look at the other side. So this is a methodology in history, actually. If you, for example, read just a treatise written by the order of a Caesar, then of course it will be about the victories of these Caesars. And this kind of propaganda started quite early. You know, the Kadesh Treaty in the 13th century BC, after that was signed after the battle between the Egypt and the Hittites. Ramses II claimed that he had a victory, but in fact he did not. So, but if you have access to what Hittites wrote, then you can compare it. So this kind of scientific approach can solve the problem still.
And that's why they destroyed the other cultures' books and writings. So
exactly.
So their truth was the only present truth, and they carved out something, or you know.
Exactly. And until very recently, during the Second World War, or just before the Second World War, you know, the famous book slaughter in Berlin.
Or
the big the burning of the library in Alexandria by the Romans, for example.
There are many examples from Soviet Union where there are photographs of Stalin, and they took out a person they killed before. At first he was their comrade.
Yes.
And then the picture was changed, and this person never existed. And they do it still today, of course.
Yes.
Some things don't change. Propaganda stays.
Armin. It was the same when we were chatting with Peter during a 4-hour travel to the airport in Korea. So if you don't get into the scene, we will not talk about archery. You can be sure.
Fine. I have no problem letting you talk and simply listening. I'm a good listener. It's fine. If you want to continue with your propaganda and all this stuff, it's fine.
No, I have to say, I really enjoy, and I talked before to Armin, and I said, for usually, I'm not for these big NGOs, UNO and UNESCO and so on. But in this case, when we met in Korea, and it was a UNESCO thing, you know, it was financed by UNESCO and UNO. United Nations in some aspect, but that was a good thing, because we could talk. You could talk to people from Japan, from everywhere around. It's a very good thing, and I really enjoyed it because I could.
Peter, I have been in such festivals held in Korea before, and in the earlier ones, they have succeeded in bringing enthusiasts together and build a network, more or less. But the further attempts have been unsuccessful, unfortunately. And the Koreans took it seriously, but they were some political flaws that they could not control. Like, for example, their president has been arrested. And that year, it was the year that we were there. So because of that, you may remember that the academic part was very insufficient. You remember that, right? Because there was a guy, Dr. Moon, who had promised me before that they were going to do that more academically. He visited Istanbul twice, and we met to talk about these kind of things. But because of that political trouble that they had to encounter, they could not do that, because I advocated always that this information transfer between the enthusiasts in a network is very important, and Korea may provide place and opportunity for people to come together, but it did not continue, unfortunately. So it was really good, but did not come to a satisfying end, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't just mean it for exchanging different form of archery, which is highly interesting, of course, but
Yes.
also to come in touch
Yes.
with the other cultures. You know, if you never have talked to a guy from
That's
Bhutan,
true.
what you know about Bhutan? Nothing. Or
Yeah,
Indonesia, or you name it. And that was the good thing. So maybe you had a bad opinion about this nation or this nation, but then you meet people from there and you say, these are nice people. I can talk to them. They are great. And so the deep core, the deep sense of this UNO, United Nations, we live there. We live there.
Yes, but good for personal satisfaction and good for personal development as well. But
yeah,
not for the well-being of archery, well-being of the traditional archery, because the Koreans or that organ specifically aimed that. I mean that they found an organization, gather people like you and the others who were there, and the interchange of the knowledge will be continuously. So it was their goal, which they could not achieve, unfortunately. So beforehand they tried that and they could not, because the first time I was in Korea was 2005. And they even founded an organization, World Traditional Archery Federation. They named it so. And they were famous archery enthusiasts of the older generation, like Stephen Selby, for example, who are older than me and who have been longer in the scene. Beat Dwyer. And these guys disappointed as well, just because they have been brought to Korea, met people, learned something from others, and then it did not continue. So that's why an organized attempt much more important. I mean, this is something like that. For example, I am considering the Turkish archery the same. So what I am doing, or what other Turkish enthusiasts are doing, should not be limited with our life, with our lifespan. I mean, we have to leave something that will be available for others after our death. So that's what I'm considering quite important, writing and experimental research. So as Peter said, all these legendary, sometimes exaggerated things about the weapons and how these weapons played considerable roles in the victories of military encounters. So this should be or can be experimentally confirmed or refused or busted. It's possible. So this is why I find it very important. I mean, for people like us, the enthusiasts who have chronographs, who knows really how a bow and arrow works, so they can really check it, whether the old treatises say right or wrong.
So Armin, say something.
Say something. Something.
Armin should say something.
I say something.
Okay.
Something. I think that nowadays we would have these social media platforms like Facebook or whatever, but this is only more. The one has this standpoint, the other one has this standpoint, and then they start fighting and arguing about each other. Instead of we all shoot bow and arrow. We had this once in a podcast a while ago, where I always think we all shoot bow and arrow. And even if he shoots three finger, we shoot thumb, he shoots a longbow, we shoot a reflex bow, we all shoot bow and arrow, we should unite and not fight against each other. We should interchange and share knowledge and share wisdom. Everybody knows something about bow and arrow. We should share it and not, no, this is not mine and you only can shoot like this. And this narrow-minded. This is sadly on these social medias. Most probably you need to meet in person like you did in Korea, that you meet this guy who shoots whatever with a thumb throw and then interesting. So, but on Facebook, this is not going to work. Only when, of course, when you're like a very prominent person like you, Murat, when you say something, then people agree. Simple.
That was the core of my speech in Korea.
Yeah.
To connect, not to separate.
Mm.
Yeah.
Armin, sorry, it was interrupted. You said you said that I should say something about what? Sorry, I could not catch it.
Oh, no, I didn't say. I only said that that when you do your videos, everybody uses you as a reference because you are like the level of knowledge everybody accepts. You know, you are the authority in Turkish archery. When you say something, then it's fine. So there is nobody arguing against it, you know. But then there are others, and then like me, I like shooting bare thumb, and then I get comments from Turkish guys, you cannot shoot without a sigir. You need to use a thumb ring. I said, look, but I can shoot without two. So this instead of appreciating that we all shoot bow and arrow, you know, this united.
Murat is the Elvis of Turkish archery.
Exactly.
Well, in fact, Armin, social media really changed the normal social structure of people. I mean, people who could not or would not say something face to face, they can say everything. So this is something that we are sometimes the victim of too. So sometimes we even, although we are suffering from these kind of things, sometimes we do such mistakes as well. So this is an era, I think, a new socialization, something that we were lucky enough to experience, I mean, 21st century. But if people can stay in the range of politeness, then it's not wrong actually to discuss about that. For example, I have pro arguments and contra arguments in using a thumb ring. I do use a thumb ring, but in the Mamluk treaties of Taiba, it is clearly mentioned that the best way is not using a ring. So if it is written, then it should be checked why he wrote this, because that's what I'm saying, that with the modern equipment and know-how we have today, we can check these. Why Taiba said that the best way shooting a bow is without a thumb ring if you form your own calluses. So you can easily put this argument in front of that guys who actually dispute shooting without ring. But in my experience, for example, I found out that shooting a rigid thumb ring, not a simple leather protector, increases the initial arrow velocity for 6.4%. And we repeated that a lot of times. The Hatra makes a difference of 1.5 to 2% as well. Even the quality of Hatra changes it. So why not having a speed difference of 7.5% if it comes to killing the enemy? So, but it doesn't mean that shooting without the thumb ring is not possible. It is possible, of course, and it is even written by a 14th century Mamluk warrior. So these kind of things should be discussed. So, but people unfortunately don't stay within this range of politeness. This is the problem.
True. This we have always this discussion with Peter. He thinks that three-finger draw is superior, and he doesn't understand why people should thumb release. Right, Peter?
No, I don't understand. No, because to me, it's so very natural, you know, to have the arrow on the other side of the bow when stalking or when handling the bow. It's so natural to me. I can't imagine to have the bow canted the other way around or so.
Don't have to.
Well, I have some experience with three-finger release as well, by the way. I don't know whether you know that or not, because in 2004, when I really decided to do something to revive the lost tradition, I had to start with three fingers because no other type of archery was available in Turkey. So I started with Olympic archery, and I occasionally shoot still my recurve and longbow just for fun. But there was a point that I decided to go on that way to really master the technique, because at the very beginning, I wanted to maintain both the skills. I mean, both shooting with 3 fingers and thumb release. But there was a long way in front of me in exploring the way of shooting with thumb ring. So that's why I left 3-finger release behind, not because I find it inferior. Contrary, there are a lot of contrasts and pros in both sides. I'll tell you something. A Turkish archery enthusiast, who is a well-known man, a friend also, I came across a video of him on Facebook saying that longbow is just a fucking stick or something like that. He didn't say fucking, I'm a little bit rude, sorry. But he humiliated the English longbow just because of the inferior technology.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe, because less expensive, when the cost of a weapon is less, and when the making of it is easier, less time consuming, then it is a good weapon.
That's a real development for military.
Yeah, of course. If you need a lot of those in short time, of course, English longbows you can make like nothing. With a reflex bow, composite takes ages. Of course.
And the question is why a composite bow was preferred by a certain part of the world or by a certain part of the armies. I have of course, some ideas I can share, of course. First of all, as Peter said, 3-finger release is so natural. The arrow is on the left side of the bow and you really can aim. I mean, not like using a sight in a modern bow, but with the arrow pad, you can aim. So with the thumb draw, unless you have with a shorter draw, you can the head of the arrowhead, or if you shoot with Chengibas technique with a very high wrist, again, even if you have a longer draw, you can see the arrowhead. But otherwise, the shooting is instinctive. You cannot do any other way. You don't see anything that you can take as a reference point consciously. But here, again, we have to avoid looking at the picture by using the glasses of 20th century. We have to be there and understand why they preferred it. There are answers, and that are logical. First of all, the fighting strategies were different. The longbow was used in defensive strategies. The composite bow was invented and developed in a geography in which both hunting and war was dynamic and based on offensive strategies. They didn't wait for the animal to come. They didn't wait for the enemy to go to it. And how? War chariots, and I think it was the 3rd millennium BC when
we can't hear you.
Right. We have a bad connection again.
Almost they needed it. Okay,
Murat, we don't hear you.
Yeah,
you were frozen.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
No. Yes, better. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Better. Yes.
Okay. Where was it?
Are you talking about
with the chariots and stuff that they attacked? That the reflex bow was for offense.
Okay. In this geography, I mean the Eurasia and Mesopotamia, the war chariot was a part of this because both the composite bow and the war at the same time, 3rd millennium BC, okay? And they needed a shorter bow to use from this very narrow port. They were chariots. They were very small platforms that were pulled by horses. And the horses were smaller than the horse that we have now. They have been enlarged with selective breeding in millennia, not only centuries. So it took time until man can ride on a horse with his equipment. But it was actually a chain. It started with the war chariot and a short bow, composite bow, and then go to the cavalry. And in this strategy, that the warrior had something that provided mobility with which he could regulate or adjust the distance between the target and himself, then he didn't need something to aim. He shoot instinctively from relatively closer distances. So that's why. But in the English warfare, it was the opposite. They were shot from approximately 200 meters.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
From a defender, he was too close. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay,
yes.
okay. I like to say something, and I also thought a lot about this this different development of composite bows and long bows or stick bows or how you like to call it. I think it depends on landscape, because if you have a prairie, a steppe, you know, like in a desert, you are depending on horseback. You live very different. In our Central Europe, it was all woods. It was all forests, you know. So you can't use a cavalry very well, because the first roads were made by the Romans, I think, the first real roads. And so
exactly.
And one thing more I like to say, I have a very simple declaration for this also. I think in your cultures, you know, these Eastern cultures, the bow was a primary weapon, and in the warfare in Europe, it was a secondary weapon. As you see with these English wars, they used it as support troops. The fighting was done with lances and swords, and they shot inside with the bows, and they were not bow warriors like in the East. You understand? I think this is a very different. The landscape is very different.
Yes. Okay, but you're wrong. Yes, you're right. But this is it's also related to how the armies were built in these two different geographies, because until the yeoman troops have been employed, the bow and arrow were in the hands of the knights, the trained warriors. Somehow didn't prefer it. Okay,
there were no warriors
in the East. Yeah, but in the East, the armies consisted of professional soldiers from very stages. Let's say 8th century, which means a complicated or sophisticated weapon like bow and arrow could have been the main equipment. Because of that, it was not like that in the European armies after the diminishing of the Roman Empire. There were small princedoms and kingdoms, and they did not have a trained army like that of the Roman legionnaires or so.
Let me say one more thing. I have had also another theory, because we in Central, you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Murat?
Peter, I cannot hear you well. I cannot. It's interrupted.
Now you can hear me now. Can you hear me?
And the position of your microphone is better too. Yes.
Okay. I have another theory about this, and I think it's also connected to the supply of woods and stuff, because if you're living in a country full of forests and woods, you can easily build another bow, but your Eastern composite bow is very sophisticated, and you can inherit it to your boy if you like so. And a wooden, you know, a stick bow, an English bow, will break or get weak. It has a lifespan, you know. It will get too weak or too you know, shot out someday, and so I think.
But all these theories make sense, but we should be very open-minded in evaluating or semi-deserted area or a steppe like where you could drive a war chariot or you can ride a horse. a bow would be a very convenient weapon.
Mm-hmm.
But then a question, in other desert-like geographies, atlatl and boomerangs were used. Why not in Eurasia?
Yeah. True.
So it is because atlatl and boomerang, in my opinion, are very primitive weapons. A composite bow is a high sophisticated weapon from the making and from the knowledge you need. A boomerang is a stick of wood you throw, and an atlatl is very primitive. Everyone can make it. But a composite bow is another thing, in my opinion.
Well, let me tell you something. The hunting boomerangs are very sophisticated, by the way, and they are longer ranging than some primitive longbows. Not the English longbow I'm talking about. I'm talking about the other type of longbows, like that used in Africa, for example. A boomerang, an Australian boomerang of 19th century, can travel up to 100 meters without vertical drop. So it is almost like a rifle. So what I'm trying to say is these theories make sense, but in most of the cases, just an explanation like that is not sufficient.
It's composed. It's of this all explanations are coming together. Every single is one aspect of the development of this culture and that culture, in my opinion.
Yes, it is cultural, much more cultural than the geographical needs or geographical requirements. It's somehow cultural.
So, but everything is a part. Every one aspect is a part of it, and it's because of the woods, because of the desert, because of the horses, because of everything.
Yeah, and the wisdom approach would be saying maybe or may have been scientific articles. In the conclusion part of the scientific articles, nobody says this is that, but people say according to our study, what we found in our study, or we may suggest that. So this is what I'm trying to say. Staying as evidence-based as possible is very important if it comes to do research on archery, even testing bows. Mm-hmm. So without any prejudices, it is very important. The prejudices, I mean, even the positive prejudices is a big mistake if it comes to understanding the technical aspect of archery.
Of course, yeah. So unfortunately, we lost Murat now. He had a thunderstorm and most probably his internet crashed. So we can't continue this talk. And you already saw that the connection was not really good. And we will have him back. We just had a phone call with him, so we will have him back in the show because what he has to tell is very, very interesting. And he has such a lot of knowledge. It's insane. I mean, you could see that they only could talk about religion for an hour. It's no problem for these two guys. So that's why. And next time we talk maybe a bit more about archery. So we will have Murat back. For this time, we need to finish, unfortunately, with a little bad audio and bad video quality, but I think it's still worth watching. And the next time we simply go in deeper into details. And if you have questions for Murat, simply write them under this video here, and then we can ask him directly. Makes sense.
And maybe we can edit out something and put it together for this one.
See the parts where it's completely hung up, then we simply it's a bit more work for me. Thank you. Very happy looking forward.
We got good feedback about the Byron Ferguson episode. Yes, it was very fun to talk with him.
Yeah, it was really nice. Yeah, it was a pleasure to talk to him. He's such a straightforward guy, so down to earth.
Yes. So cool. Yeah. He's as cool as he looks.
Yeah, no, he really is. He's really famous. But he's like, I'm from Alabama. I like him.
And I'm sure we will have him again.
Yeah, I think he liked it. He was a little short in time because of the issues he had with hospital.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he said many good things, many interesting things he told us.
Yeah. Okay, then we finish for today.
Okay.
Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.
Thanks
and click the bell button and subscribe to both channels, obviously. And if you have any questions in the comments, there's the space for it. And then we see you next time. We will have Murat back, as said. We will have Petra back, and we surely will have Byron back, and many more to come. Okay, yep. Thank you very much for watching.
Good. Okay, howdy.
Stay tuned. Howdy. See you next time.
See you next time.
Much. Bye-bye.
Bye.